Hi, I'm Trish Triumpho Sullivan, and I'm back with a little bit more in-depth in our definitions of historical categories. So this is Art History 1B and lecture number 2. You guys keep in mind that these are mini lectures, okay? So this is part of a larger lecture that in order to keep it kind of quick and fast-paced for you guys and digestible little bites, I'm doing shorter little lectures. And so the lecture number 2 is going to be starting off with some definitions in our historical categories. So let's do a little bit more in-depth on chronology. Make sure I spell it correctly, right? So before we can create a history, right, the artwork needs to be correctly dated. And our tool for that is chronology. Right, that's how we're dating stuff. We're measuring a scale of historical time, basically, or even more basically, how about a timeline, right? So we're basically doing a timeline, and I think that's probably the easiest way to put it in everyday terms. But the art history term is chronology, right? And it's a timeline where periods and subperiods are arranged in order, right? So we've got like a timeline and they're arranged in order from the oldest to the newest. They're, we call periods and subperiods, right, in order from oldest to the present times, or chronologically, right? So they're arranged chronologically on the timeline. So if we're starting like at 0, the beginning of time, to the present, which we call right now 2020, and we have something in here that's like, this is where this is the current era, right? And this is before current era. Right? And so this is a timeline where things are taking place, right? Artists are creating works, and we have it arranged chronologically from 0 to 2020, right? And we're looking at this historical sequence, and we look at changes to artwork over this historical timeline, and as the style in changes in style and artists over time. Okay, that's how we're looking. That's chronological, so it's over a period of time. The individual artworks don't change, right? They're still there. They remain in their chronological time slot whenever they were created. But their ways of thinking, the cultures, the artist's thought patterns, the cultural pressures about the meaning of life and the meaning of art, they do change, okay? And Sister Wendy says in her story of painting, which you guys should have watched by now, she says, art changes, but it doesn't get better. And I want you guys to really keep that in mind, because even though art's changing, it doesn't mean it's better than the cave paintings from 50,000 years ago. It's just different. Those cave paintings are freaking amazing, right? And so I wouldn't say it's better than the art that I create, right? It's just different. So that's a really good way to look at it. It's just different. So think about that. So chronology is our one way, and another way that we are categorizing is provenance. So provenance, right, is where the artwork was created. So although the most basic way to categorize artworks is by pinpointing the time of their creation, right, chronologically, on our timeline, classifying by place of origin, right, and that's what this is. Provenance is place of origin. Categorizing by that is the second most important method of understanding the artwork, right? That's it. Different periods, such as Gothic, have a huge variation in regional styles. So placing the origin, like where it is on the map, is vital to understanding how art from one area might influence art in a different region. So this is a real important thing. So the first two categories are simply time and place. Pretty simple. So you've got time and place, chronology and provenance. Let me erase this and we'll move on to the next one so we get all of our much as possible in here. So next we have style and stylistic change. Okay, so style and stylistic change. So while a time and place, right, have a lot, if not everything, to do with the way an artwork looks, okay, and a function of its historical period. We use style to describe a grouping of artworks from the same general time and place, okay, as a product of the environment that they were created in, right? So they were created in a certain environment. You know, the culture, the religion, and a whole variety of other factors can influence that. So as we're as we're looking, however, like as we're looking at stylistic change, it's important not to evaluate change over time with art getting better. And I think that's a big issue. We're talking about that with Sister Wendy. So it's important to know that art doesn't get better over time. It's an evolution, right? It evolves. It's a development, right? So things develop. They're not simply random change. Okay, things, artists like evolve of what's happening in their community. Things change. Maybe there's a different leader. Someone passes away. There's a drought. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that can change in the environment. Or there's a flood, right? Like things can happen. And that also can affect the artwork that's being produced, and because it affects the people who are producing that artwork. Okay. So I want to emphasize that development doesn't mean that it's a progression to some artistic ideal or perfection. Yes, we all like to be perfect. However, changes in style don't mean that we're going towards this perfect goal or this ideal that's up here somewhere that we haven't achieved yet. The art is not like science and technology where it improves, right? So when we look at science and technology, later is better. Okay, like we look at the difference between, say, a landline telephone to a cell phone, right? So in some cases, later is better. What happens if your battery dies on your cell phone? Well, in that case, a landline can be a blessing, right? So it may be that the earlier model, from 50 years ago, is better than a cell phone, because if you don't have your battery for your cell phone, it's not going to work, right? So it's important to kind of think about those kind of things. So a progression or development in style does not mean it's better than the previous style. So I want you to really think that. So it doesn't necessarily improve. So stylistic development refers to a series of kind of irregular steps of little things that happen, and of varying durations, right? So it's irregular and the time frame may be varying of what happens. And during which like a series of possibilities are explored by the artist, both artistically, by individuals, right? So we have some of these artistic possibilities are explored by individuals and through collaboration with other artists, until new stylistic traits and tendencies appear that we can identify as being different from the style that was there before, the previous style. So style and stylistic change, right? So this refers to something that's happening in a general region. So we're looking at stylistic change, as or style, I mean, as something that happens geographically and historically in a certain area. So this is usually an area, a geographical area. We've got a geographic area. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to make it look a little bit more. That is probably with a group of people, a group of artists, right? And they're working within their own culture. So we have this culture influencing them. So all this stuff is something that's happening in one area, right? And stylistic change happens when these people are experiencing change, in their area, in their culture, and they're kind of exploring these different artistic possibilities, and discovering different ways to do things, ways of seeing, ways of looking at things. And as they're doing that, right, whatever their style is, starts to change. And so we have that stylistic change happening, kind of evolving. And I just to remind you guys, it's not evolving that it's better than what came before. It's just different than what came before. And that's what stylistic change is about. Remember Sister Wendy's words: art doesn't get better, right?